The trade deadline is well in the rearview mirror at this point, but there are still plenty of opportunities to improve the margins of your fantasy baseball team. We've got 20 names here for you on the RotoWire Fantasy Baseball Podcast. Hello and welcome, everybody, to the Saturday edition of the RotoWire Fantasy Baseball Podcast. Erik Halterman here with Ryan Boyer with another set of fab pickups for you. And Ryan, still time, right, to improve your roster. We're not quite at the point where these episodes start to feel a little silly. There's still, nearly a third of the season left, right?
Sure. I mean, I think your focus, if it hasn't already arrived a bit ago, especially if you're in categories leagues, really try to zero in on those categories where you can make up ground. I mean, you're less concerned on August 9th about quote unquote winning your fantasy trade. It could potentially look a little lopsided, but if you're getting the boost you need in certain categories, that's probably a move you need to make. So you can still make up ground if you hyper focus on those areas where you can improve.
Yeah, definitely a good thing to think about in categories leagues. I suppose if you're in a league with playoffs, which is often a points league, although it could be categories as well, could be time to think about, can I afford to stash someone for the last couple of weeks because I've already locked up a playoff spot, or do I need to fight for every single point the next couple of weeks? So a couple different dynamics to think about this time of year. We will be giving you our usual share of pickups in just a couple minutes, but as always, we've got some headlines to discuss, including an injury update for Tommy Edman, who hit the IL earlier in the week with ankle issues, a sprained right ankle. He actually suffered that last Sunday, but the news just came out yesterday that Tommy Edman is going to be out until at least September. Edman not necessarily having the season that his drafters would have hoped, which means, even if it's only a 3-week absence, that's nearly half of the remaining time. Yep. Probably a potential drop in a lot of places. Do you see any players who look a little bit more interesting now that we know Edman's cleared out for at least another 3-4 weeks?
Yeah, Alex Freeland, seeing an uptick in playing time, and he had been playing third base while Max Muncy was out. Now that Muncy's back, he's kind of shifted over to second base. He's also sharing time with Miguel Rojas there. Unfortunately, Freeland has held his own so far. Certainly a good prospect. The fact that he's batting, ninth usually when he's been in the lineup and doesn't necessarily have a stranglehold on that second base job, I think he's probably better off left to deeper leagues. But he is interesting. I think Edman is okay to drop. I mean, he's been bizarrely inactive on the bases. 3 stolen bases this season. Not quite sure what that's all about. I mean, if you go back to since he joined the Dodgers, just 9 steals over 123 games, that maybe that's just a conscious effort to not run as much when you've got thumpers behind you and in front of you and all around you. So that really loses Edman, makes him a lot less interesting for fantasy purposes. Hitting for a little bit of power this season, but not nearly as much as that kind of late season power splurge he had last year and early season this year. It's you're talking about, as you mentioned, potentially half the season that he's going to miss. And is he going to pick up the running game on the way back, especially coming back from an ankle injury? You can't count on that at this point. So I think it's okay to drop Edman.
Yeah, unusual how his season turned out. It seemed like he could be quite an interesting fantasy option. Take a player who does a little bit of everything, move him to a smart organization, the Dodgers, who he showed some flashes with late last year, but hasn't really worked out. We've got other injury news to discuss here. How about Chris Sale, who is working his way back from the broken rib he suffered while trying to preserve that shutout, diving for an infield single off of, or a possible infield single off the bat of Juan Soto. He ended up finishing 1 out short of a shutout in that game. That was all the way back in June 18th. And there was some speculation that with Atlanta well out of the race and with Sale having, a fairly lengthy injury history, should they just shut him down? That's not what's going to be happening. He threw 30 pitches in a simulated game Thursday, and he's set to make a rehab start Tuesday. So it seems like Chris Sale, if he was dropped in any of those leagues, definitely grab him yesterday if you can.
Yeah, as you mentioned, I mean, I guess you can say it's kind of logically thinking about where the Braves are in the standings, and given Sale's injury history, some might be thinking that he could be shut down or at least limited down the stretch. But I know he's spoken to very much wanting to finish out the season, not only just because he's a competitive guy, but it also builds him up workload wise, so he can theoretically be more prepared to reach hopefully 200 innings next year. So, I mean, it seems like he's going to be all systems go once he comes back, probably a couple rehab starts. He had been, slow start this season for Sale, first month or so, but particularly of late, prior to going on the injured list, I mean, he had been back to being one of the best pitchers in baseball. So, yeah, definitely scoop him up if he happens to be still dangling on your waiver wire.
All right, and one more piece of injury news. The Brewers' Logan Henderson, who had just finally gotten another opportunity in the big league rotation with Jakob Marsee briefly on the IL. Well, it's a flexor strain for Logan Henderson. He is on the IL himself. I don't know the exact timeline here, but I would imagine flexor strain, that's one of the bad ones with less than 2 months left in the season. Would not be surprised me at all if he's done for the year. And unfortunately, this sort of injury is often the sort which knocks him out for a season and a half due to serious elbow surgery. Hoping that's not the case for Logan Henderson, but he was a pitcher who showed excellent numbers in pretty much every category in the minors and in his 5 big league starts. The only category Logan Henderson didn't have good numbers in was innings pitched. So I figured, hey, you got to get this guy in the majors now while his arm still works. Unfortunately, that's not really how it went down. Just 5 big league starts, a 1.78 ERA and 0.99 WHIP. So keep this name in mind, but unfortunately, Logan Henderson just not going to be a factor the rest of this year. Anybody interesting in Milwaukee to pick up now that he's out of the way?
I don't think immediately. I mean, Uncle Ted mentions here Chad Patrick. He could get another opportunity, but Jakob Marsee will be due back soon from the IL. Tobias Myers is going to should be just a spot start today. Logan Henderson initially held back by Brewers' sudden influx of rotation depth, and
right
more recently, unfortunately, an arm injury. So showing a ton of promise, but he's basically knocked out for the rest of the season. Even if he does come back, it's probably not going to be in an integral role for the Brewers, but certainly someone to keep an eye on for the future. And deep leagues, I guess you can take a shot on someone like Chad Patrick, but I don't know that he's guaranteed too many, if any, starts down the stretch.
Yeah, that sounds right to me. And even if Tobias Myers does somehow stick around longer than we expect, I'm just not sure there's a whole lot there, even though he was decent last season. I think that was probably one of the best versions of Tobias Myers we're going to see. But it is time to move to the main topic of today's show and every Saturday show, our top fab pickups of the week, starting with our priority ads. These are guys that you'd want to pick up in deep leagues. Occasionally, some of these guys might be, returning from injury or recent call-ups who are showing something, who might be available in your deep leagues and not just the shallow leagues. Who is your first priority hitter this week, Ryan?
I've got Noelvi Marte. I mean, once the Cabrian Hayes trade consummated, like many others, I suspected it could be bad news for Noelvi Marte's fantasy outlook. but now he's all of a sudden a full-time outfielder. He started 7 of the last 9 games in right field for the Reds. Just 174 plate appearances so far this season for Marte. He started the season actually back in the minors, also dealt with some injuries, but does have 7 home runs, 7 stolen bases during that time. You look at his complete major league track record and 539 plate appearances, essentially a full season's worth. He's got 14 home runs and 22 stolen bases. Cut his strikeout rate this year down to 19%. That's after it was at 31% last year. He's also got his pull rate up to 47.7% in 2025. That's a massive jump from where it had been previously. Also hitting the ball in the air more. Seems like he's made a conscious effort to do that. Probably a good thing when you're calling Great American Ballpark home. The fact that he's been able to make that adjustment and is not only not striking out more, but he's actually striking out a lot less. I think that's encouraging. Max exit velo this season in the 98th percentile, sprint speed in the 91st percentile. Tools are certainly there. I don't know if we know what Marte is at this point, what he's going to be, but still just 23. When you show those kind of skills and show a strikeout rate that's trending downward, I think that's a good sign. Also has double eligibility now. I think it's a good time to scoop up Noelvi Marte if he's available.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. I definitely agree with that point about, we don't know what he is, but he is a young and talented player. I think we know that much, and that's the sort of player that you want to give some time to. You want to give him time to figure things out, and I think that Noelvi Marte, he might figure things out down the stretch here to the point that he helps most fantasy formats. I have got not a particularly exciting name here to start things off. Good thing to mention, just 12 minutes into the show, already to the boring names, but Lenyn Sosa, second baseman for the White Sox. He is somebody who I would consider in shallower formats at this point. I would not have earlier in the year. Through the end of May, Sosa had a 692 OPS. He had a good batting average then, a 280, but he basically didn't take any walks, and that left him with just a 298 OBP. Just didn't really do a whole lot. I believe was it just 4 homers in the first 2 months of the season. But since the start of June, 9 more homers, OPS up to 806 since June 1st. Strikeout rate down from 23 to 20%. The walks up from 2.5% to 5%. This is the guy who's just 25 years old, so was never an elite talent or anything like that, but was supposed to be a decent enough big league player who's continuing to take steps forward as he gets more experience under his belt. The other reason that I'm mentioning Lenyn Sosa this week is his last 6 starts have all come out of the number 2 spot in the batting order. He spent most of the year hitting 6, 7, 8. So you got a guy who's still young, who's showing more as the season progresses, and is now moving up to a key spot in the batting order. He's also been spending some time at first base, so he may have picked up first base eligibility in your league. In fact, he probably has. It's 16 games now. Throw that in with second. That gives him the key corner/middle. So I think Lenyn Sosa, perfectly fine guy to round out your roster. I wish there was actual speed there, just 2 steals on the year, but 13 homers with a 276 average from a guy who is, again, now batting second. It's a useful enough guy to have on the end of your roster, even in shallower format. So I am upgrading Lenyn Sosa from a deep league only player to somebody who I would consider in most spots. You don't have to clear out somebody who's actually interesting to get Lenyn Sosa, but if you need a middle infielder or a corner infielder, he's fine.
Yeah, typically not the type of profile I typically want to invest in, but interesting in that, look at his career chase rate is at 40%. That's like way, way above league average. Also got a chase contact rate of 65%. That's also way, way above league average. Just a unique ability to put the bat on the ball. I mean, if you're going to, typically that's the kind of profile that's probably going to produce lots of weak contact because you're chasing pitches out of the zone and making contact. That generally doesn't mean you're going to hit the ball very hard, but his is actually ticking up. I mean, it's right at league average hard hit rate, a little above league average with the barrel rate, max exit velo ticking up. So yeah, I think Lenyn Sosa has at least become interesting at this point. Next guy I had in a deep league section last week, but I think it's time to move Jakob Marsee up to the priority section already because, man, he's off to a great start. 9 for 21. A lot of extra base hits in those 9 for 21, 1 home run, 1 triple, 4 doubles, a couple of stolen bases. He struck out and walked at the same rate so far. Also hitting the ball really hard, 52.9% hard hit rate, 11.8% barrel rate. Also showing the ability to pull the ball on the air with reckless abandon so far. That's usually a good sign for a young hitter. Has started all 8 games since being promoted, including 2 against lefties for a left-handed batter. Good numbers at AAA, 817 OPS, 14 home runs, 47 stolen bases. It's funny, you think of Jakob Marsee and you look at the numbers from the minors and you think, oh, that's a speed-only guy, but he's actually not super fast. Just a really good base stealer. I mean, his sprint speed so far is like right around league average, but he's consistently stolen a ton of bases in the minors. So just really, and he's been aggressive so far, going 2 for 3 in steals in the early going for the Marlins. Charlie mentions here Jakob Marsee, maybe fool's gold 239 hitter in the minors. I would not expect the average to continue at that rate. Certainly, I'm with you there, but getting the opportunity to play every day. He's got a little bit of power. I think he's going to contribute in the stolen base department. So I think he's worth rostering even in shallower formats right now.
Yeah, I think that sounds fair to me. I want to shout out, we've got a new column at RotoWire. I think 2 entries in it so far from Jeremy Schneider. It is top prospects to stash, and Jakob Marsee was right at the top of his list. So I recommend checking that one out. You can use code YouTube15 for 15% off a subscription to rotowire.com to hear more or read more Jakob Marsee analysis. Mention also, he's really high walk rates throughout the minors. So if you're in an OBP league, that low batting average is actually going to be replaced by a perfectly fine on-base percentage, and that makes Jakob Marsee even more interesting in those formats. I'm going to give you my next name here, which is Ryan Mountcastle, who just returned yesterday, was it, from a hamstring strain, which had kept him out since May 30th. And Ryan Mountcastle, I suppose early in the season, was competing for playing time with more players on the Orioles, but there's been a bit of a clear out there. Should be a cleaner path to even more regular at-bats. Things were not good for Mountcastle, though, before the injury. In 53 games so far this season, he has just 3 homers, a 644 OPS, and I believe he homered in his return to the lineup yesterday, so that means before the injury, he only had 2 home runs. This was not a good season for Ryan Mountcastle, but I don't know if we need to look at those 52 games before the injury and say that's who he is now. I think we can look at the 2 seasons before that where he was hitting 270 and 271. Power numbers that were definitely a little bit depressed, but with the fences, a little bit easier to homer over in Baltimore this year. I think Ryan Mountcastle is more interesting. I don't think that he is that interesting of a shallow league first baseman or corner guy. So I think if you're doing okay there, I don't think you really need to go out of your way to add Ryan Mountcastle. I don't think he's ever really quite hit the heights that it looked like he might earlier in his career, but I think he's a perfectly solid corner bat with some power. I think the power is going to be there. Consistently 45%-ish hard hit rates the last few years, 47% this year, even as things weren't going great. And by the way, his expected batting average on the year, 273, right in line with his actual batting average the last couple of seasons. So I don't actually see anything very wrong with Ryan Mountcastle's numbers before the injury And I think that he can just get back to being the guy he was the last couple of years, which is a perfectly adequate first baseman, especially if the playing time, the occasional off days against righties, hopefully those are gone down the stretch. And Mountcastle just gets to play almost every day. You got another name for us?
I do. My final hitter, kind of a stash here because he's not in the majors right now, but Jordan Lawlar, sooner than later, should get his opportunity. Currently sidelined by a hamstring issue at AAA Reno, but he's back to going through baseball activities. Seems like he's going to return to action soon. And with Eugenio Suarez traded, Blaze Alexander doesn't represent much of a roadblock for Lawlar getting that third base job. It's been another awesome season at AAA when he's been healthy. 319, 410, 583, 10 home runs, 18 steals, and 250 plate appearances at AAA Reno. Has not been good for Lawlar at the major league level so far. 4 for 50 with 20 strikeouts. Earlier this season when he was up with the Diamondbacks, I think he went 0 for 19. So it hasn't been great at the big league level, but this is a guy who has been one of the top prospects in baseball. Still only 23 years of age. Still remains in James Anderson's top 200 in dynasty rankings. I think it's only a matter of time before he takes over at third base with the Diamondbacks and maybe rush out to get him stashed now before we find out he's going to be promoted. And by then it could be too late. So run out and get him now.
Yeah, I can get behind that. I think we are eventually going to see a good run from Jordan Lawlar. I don't really think that we've seen any reason to believe that the guy he was supposed to be isn't eventually going to show up. He's just still pretty young and hasn't had the opportunity. So once we eventually see him getting that opportunity, I'd love for it to be on my team if I've got the space for it. My final priority hitter here is a guy that I definitely didn't think I'd be making a priority hitter at any point this season, but Isaac Collins might actually be actually a good baseball player. That's what I'm trying to figure out here. This is a guy who is 28 years old. He is a rookie. He had a couple games worth of experience last year, 11 games, 19 plate appearances. Looked like a quad A nobody, you'd have to say, heading into this season. And he had good numbers at AAA last year, but nothing special. And that was as a 26-year-old. But Isaac Collins has worked his way into regular at-bats. And since June 1st, this is, again, you may have noticed a theme here. I was doing a little bit of research on the best hitters since the start of June. Not only is Lenyn Sosa much better over that stretch, Isaac Collins has been excellent over that stretch. He is 9th in OPS since June 1st. 7th and 8th are Ronald Acuna and Juan Soto. 10th is Vlad Jr., but 9th, right there in the middle of all those guys, Isaac Collins, a 949 OPS since June 1st. I believe that was the stat I pulled yesterday, so maybe it's changed by a point or two. Oh, it's probably gone down. He went 0 for 4 yesterday. Never mind. Don't pick up Isaac Collins. But no, this is a good player, apparently. A good all-around player. It seems not a lot of power here. Only 7 homers in 94 games. But, a 40% hard hit rate. So that's not somebody who is going to really struggle to impact the ball. Collins has a 290 batting average on the season and a 393 OBP. I wouldn't trust that batting average fully. The XBA down at 259, but very good plate skills, about a league average strikeout rate combined with a 13% walk rate. Also has a bit of speed, has stolen 13 bases on the year in a little over half a season's worth of at-bats. So that's, 20 steal speed. This is maybe a 12 to 15 homer, 20 to 25 steal guy over the course of a full season. And he's also played excellent defense in left field, which is going to keep him in the lineup more often, even if he does have a slump. I think Isaac Collins you can actually consider in some of these shallower leagues. I should mention also, if you're looking at just guys who have torn it up over the last couple of months, Brandon Marsh, who was mentioned here by Uncle Ted, is another one of those outfielders who has been much better since June 1st than he was early in the season. Maybe offers a little more speed, but Collins has some speed as well. So I don't know. Can you get behind Isaac Collins as actually a shallow league fantasy asset, or is this just a 28-year-old who's having a hot couple months because everybody on the Brewers seems to be playing well this year?
Yeah, kind of the perfect poster boy for this year's Brewers, huh? I saw a stat earlier today that they have the lowest barrel rate in all of baseball for any team, the Brewers. And I believe they currently have the best record in baseball. And Isaac Collins not going to set the world on fire with his batted ball rate, but useful, well-rounded player. And he's batted third the last 2 games for the Brewers. So now up in a opportunistic spot in the lineup as well. So probably not going to stand out in any area, but useful player, especially in 5 outfielder leagues. Moving on to the pitching ranks, got Cade Horton of the Cubs, kind of turned into a bit of a stopper for the Cubs lately, unscored upon in each of his last 4 starts. ERA has gone from 4.45 down to 3.18 over that stretch. Only an 18% strikeout rate so far for Cade Horton. He's got a high of 6 strikeouts so far at the major league level. But look under the hood, he's got a whiff rate in the 67th percentile versus a strikeout rate just in the 21st percentile. So it seems like he's probably due for some positive regression in that regard. Above average velocity with his fastball. He's also got a sweeper inducing whiffs at 41.3%. His changeup at 52.5%. Good velocity, a couple of secondaries that can miss bats, had a 31.7% strikeout rate in the minors. So I'm not really worried about him missing bats over the long haul. Tentatively lined up for 2 starts next week. One of them is at Toronto, tough matchup, but then he gets the Pittsburgh Pirates back at home. So if Cade Horton is still available in your league, I think he needs to be scooped up right away.
Yeah, it is weird that he is not a strikeout pitcher in the majors, because in the minors, it looked like he was one of those classic pitching prospects who definitely can strike batters out.
Yep.
But does he know where it's going? Can he, manage contact as well? In 6 starts at AAA this year, 31% strikeout rate to go with a 12% walk rate. This, again, looks like, a Joe Boyle type or something. But suddenly this year in the majors, it's decent control. Also a very good ground ball rate, 47% compared to 31% at AAA. I never totally know what to do when a pitcher just has a very different statistical profile in the majors compared to the minors. But that point that he's actually still missing bats, even if he's not getting strikeouts, that's definitely encouraging. Maybe the strikeouts will come soon. I've got a starting pitcher for you here who I'm not sold on, but I do want to mention what he's doing lately. Joey Wentz would have been a better name to mention before he was knocked around a little bit in his last start. Joey Wentz, who I should mention, is now on Atlanta, his 3rd team of the season, if you have not been keeping up on all the latest Joey Wentz news. But in 5 outings with Atlanta, it's a 3.09 ERA and 0.90 whip, 27% strikeout rate to go with an 8% walk rate. And he also noted that he has made a change since joining Atlanta, again, his 3rd team of the season. He also spent last year with 2 different organizations. So this is a 27-year-old who's already becoming a journeyman, but when you pass through several different organizations, you might pick up something, like, for example, a new grip on his cutter, which is what Joey Wentz says is driving his recent form. 24 strikeouts in 23 1/3 innings with Atlanta. So if you need some whiffs, and then I guess the question is, how are we treating Atlanta in terms of likelihood of getting you wins? I still don't think I'm treating them like they're 48-67. I don't think I'm treating them like a 48-67 team. I think I'm still treating them as if they're an okay team. Maybe that's wrong, but I don't actually think that Atlanta is a terrible place to pick up wins the rest of the year. So if Wentz has shown something by tweaking one of his pitches and we're seeing the results, yes, it was a bad start his last time out, but there seems to be a path to regular starts for as long as he's able to hold on to him. The Atlanta rotation has been a mess all year, so I think Joey Wentz may be kind of interesting.
Going to the bullpen for my last pitcher recommendation. I kind of poo-pooed the idea of Phil Maton around the trade deadline because I'm a noted Robert Garcia honk, but Garcia's stumbled lately. 13.50 ERA, 3.38 WHIP over his last 4 appearances. He entered in the 5th inning in Friday's game. Also dealt with a back issue recently. It seems like he's past that, but that's the sort of thing that can always crop back up. And Phil Maton has continued to look great since joining the Rangers. 3 scoreless innings. Picked up a save for them on Tuesday against the Yankees. Had an awesome year. 2.18 ERA, 51-16 strikeout to walk rate over 41 and a third innings. Look at Phil Maton's track record. I mean, he looks more like a middle reliever / maybe setup man, but I mean, he's been really, really good this season. The strikeouts have always been there throughout his career, and he's upticked that even more this season. Pitching really well, and I mean, even if you don't believe that Phil Maton is going to be a lockdown reliever for the next couple of years, he's pitching really well now, and he only has to do it for another 7 weeks, and he could potentially be the Rangers' new closer. So I think Phil Maton should be scooped up.
Yeah, I can definitely get behind that. I've got one more priority pitcher for you, but first I want to throw in a name from the chat. Kyle Bradish. He has made 4 rehab starts as he works his way back from Tommy John surgery. His rehab assignment began July 24th, and unless something comes up, you're only allowed to be on rehab for a month. So by August 24th, about 2 weeks from now, he should theoretically be up. Kyle Bradish was really good before he went down for Tommy John surgery. A 2.83 ERA, 104 WHIP in 2023, his last full season. And he was looking like the same kind of pitcher in 8 starts last year before going down. Problem is the rehab assignment hasn't really gone all that well. The last 2 starts in particular, Bradish has allowed 10 runs, 8 of them earned in 6 2/3 innings. So it's tough to give an extremely warm endorsement of Kyle Bradish. Over the course of those 4 rehab starts, 22% strikeout rate. It's not great against minor leaguers when you had a 33% strikeout rate of the big leagues the last time we saw you, but he is keeping the ball on the ground. It's just really tricky with these late season Tommy John returnees, right, Ryan? Because we often say guys, when they're first coming back from Tommy John surgery, give them at least a month or 2, sometimes give them a whole year, however long it's going to take Sandy Alcantara. But it's not always the case that we want to use them in their first month's worth of starts, and we might only get a month worth of starts from Kyle Bradish. That said, if you have the opportunity to get someone who's been as good as he has in the past, and it's not going to cost you much, I would still get behind that, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's the key takeaway there. If you can afford to stash him now, I mean, I loved Kyle Bradish before he got injured. Don't know what it's going to look like coming back from Tommy John surgery, especially this late in the year. But if you have that roster spot available, absolutely go ahead and stash him because the upside is certainly there.
All right, my actual final priority pitcher for you. I'm going to talk about Bubba Chandler here because there is a date on the baseball calendar. August 15th is the date at which you can call up a prospect, but they won't accrue enough service time to no longer be a rookie next season. And baseball teams are now incentivized to keep their top prospects as rookies because if they win Rookie of the Year, the team gets an extra draft pick the following season. So it's not just going to be Chandler that we talk about here. Maybe we'll throw out a couple more names. Maybe Samuel Basallo of the Orioles. I don't know if you have any more, Ryan. Such top prospects who spent most of the year at AAA, who we thought could have been called up, late spring, early summer because, hey, they deserved it. Or we thought could have been called up at the deadline because an opportunity was created. This is, I think, in a lot of ways, the final date. Well, I guess maybe September 1st, too, when you get the extra roster spots. this is where the cost to a team for calling up a prospect really is starting to go down. So Bubba Chandler is somebody who was being drafted this past February and March because it really looked like Chandler was going to be up, as soon as the Pirates could steal an extra year of team control. And in his first few starts, it looked like he was going to deserve that. And then his performance started to fall off right around the point where it looked like he should have been up already. And was that a psychological thing where he was just mad that he wasn't in the majors? And so he didn't perform at his best for several months? Maybe that's just a cop-out and he's just not actually as good as we think. We should mention that his last couple starts haven't been great. 8 runs in 10 innings over his last 2, 5 walks. The walks have been a problem for Chandler throughout the year, an 11% walk rate, but he also has a 28% strikeout rate. I think there's plenty of top pitching prospects who, if they combined a 11% walk rate with a 28% strikeout rate at the AAA level, we'd say, yeah, this guy has some flaws, but he's pretty interesting. I think we're quite down on Chandler's stat line just because we expected more and we expected him to already be here. But I wouldn't be totally out. I think this is still a pretty interesting pitcher who, again, could finally get that opportunity about 1 week from today. So I think that I would, again, try to stash Chandler. If he doesn't come up right after that August 15th deadline, whatever. I mean, he's not been so good that you can't afford, that missing out on him would be terrible. But I think that we do still have one more chance for him to get the call this season. Are there any other guys in that category? Chandler and Samuel Basallo, the catcher for the Orioles, are the two who stick out to me. Any other names that you would have in mind?
Yeah, definitely those two guys. And I'm going to stick with the Orioles here too and agree with Uncle Ted that Dylan Beavers is another guy to consider him. He's had a great season at AAA Norfolk. He's already almost gone 2020. Almost as many walks as strikeouts. There are at-bats to be had in that Orioles outfield, especially with Heston Kjerstad has been really bad this year and also out with kind of an undisclosed injury as well. Also throw J.J. Wetherholt out as well. I mean, he just got promoted to AAA Memphis not that long ago, but he's continued to be awesome there. Got a 1067 OPS in his first 19 games with Memphis, already at 6 home runs and stolen a couple bases. Don't think we're going to see him right at that August 15th mark, and maybe not at all, but I think there's a pretty decent chance we could see him later on this season as the Cardinals turn the page to 2026, and Wetherholt has a chance to be a real fantasy difference maker.
Yeah, one more name, maybe Andrew Painter, but he really actually hasn't been that good this whole season, unfortunately, and particularly lately. It's 5 straight starts with no more than 4 strikeouts for Andrew Painter, even though he's averaging over 5 innings in those starts. On the season, strikeout rate is all the way down at 23%. This is a guy who was in the 30s, even high 30s early in his career before the injury. 4.75 ERA, 136 whip on the year for Andrew Painter. I'm just not sure the Phillies are going to decide that he needs to make any big league starts this season, unfortunately, the way things have been going. So I would not make him a priority add as part of that August 15th push. But we are going to move on to our deep league ads right after this message from the NFFC. The NFFC RotoWire Fantasy Football Online Championship is live. Play fantasy football against your favorite RotoWire experts on NFFC this football season. Jeff Erickson, Nick Whalen, and more will compete in the RotoWire NFFC Online Championship for a shot at $250,000. Sign up for a draft today at rotowire.com/high stakes. That's rotowire.com/high stakes. And welcome back, everybody, to the RotoWire Fantasy Baseball Podcast, Saturday Fab Edition. Erik Halterman and Ryan Boyer here. Moving on to our deep league ads. Starting on the mound with a guy who I think's been mentioned 1 or 2 times in the chat already. Ryan, who do you got?
He has Christian Javier. And I frankly agree with Charlie C that I don't know if we can trust him when he's back. I mean, we mentioned kind of the uncertainty about pitchers coming back from Tommy John and he has shown some control issues during his rehab assignment. 5.14 ERA. He's walked as many batters as he struck out over 14 innings, 15 walks and 15 strikeouts. But he's got the pitch count built up. Looks like he's going to make his season debut next week, potentially 2 starts. Although I don't know that that's a great thing. It might convince you to throw him in your lineup right away, and I don't know that I would be ready to do that just yet. What is the velocity going to look like with Christian Javier? I think that's important. During his peak, had a fastball of 93.8 miles per hour. It was down to just 91.7 miles per hour last season. In his last rehab start, he averaged 92.5 miles per hour, so kind of right in the middle there. And he's one of these guys that has the really good IVB on the fastball, and he gets a lot of whiffs with his four-seamer. So I think it's important that he has that little extra velocity, so that's something to keep an eye on. Maybe it starts to tick up a little more the farther removed he is from surgery. But as Charlie C. mentioned in the chat, I think it's more of a flyer on Javier. I'd probably keep him benched initially, but he's shown the ability in the past to be a worthwhile fantasy contributor. So hopefully maybe come late August, September, he can be a solid addition.
Yeah, maybe one who has a little bit more appeal in fantasy leagues with playoffs where you can bench him for his first couple starts. Then if he looks deserving of a spot in your starting lineup during your playoff weeks, then maybe by then you'll know could theoretically offer you quite a bit if he can approach his previous form. I'm going to go with Cade Cavalli, who I believe has also been mentioned in our chat today. Cade Cavalli made his major league debut back in 2022, just a single start. He was a first-round pick in the 2020 draft for the Washington Nationals. Unfortunately, he needed Tommy John surgery after just one big league start, and really looked like he was going to be one of those cautionary tales, I guess we could say, to remind people that, hey, pitchers don't always get back to the same level after Tommy John surgery. He didn't look right. It took him quite a bit of time to get back to being the pitcher he was supposed to be. Even this year, in 17 minor league starts, a 5.35 ERA, a 1.45 whip. Things don't look great for Cade Cavalli on the whole, but he is getting some major league opportunities now with Michael Soroka, now a Chicago Cub, or I guess now a member of the injured list for the Chicago Cubs. That was a missed pickup recommendation apparently the other week, and also a missed trade acquisition for the Cubs, picking up a guy who immediately got hurt or had been showing signs of injury right before the trade as well. But Cavalli, there might be something here. His last 2 starts in the minors combined 14 strikeouts with no walks, and then in the majors, in his big league debut against the Athletics, went 4 1/3, 0 runs, 3 hits, 6 strikeouts, and 1 walk. This is basically just a bet on somebody who was supposed to be good several years ago who now has an opportunity. I don't think you can really tell yourself a particularly convincing story about his recent numbers. Although I should mention, looking at the projections, they're not that bad. Oopsie, 4.18 ERA, Steamer all the way down at 3.95. The bat has him up at 4.43, but I think the bat's ERA projections are all a little bit high right now. I think that might be a thing just due to league environment. But in general, this is the guy who, after only 2 major league starts, is projecting to be okay. Is that the projections looking back at his minor league numbers from before the surgery? I'm not totally sure. Again, recent numbers not great. The pedigree is there, though. So if you want to take a flyer on somebody who has something, past prospect pedigree and still not particularly old, he is 26. I think it adds up to somebody worth taking a flyer on.
Yep, we got another injured guy to take a flyer on, and that's Ryan Weathers of the Marlins. Looks like that rehab assignment is imminent for him. We had him. He was pretty exciting early on in the season, showed the big fastball uptick in velocity, averaging 97.2 miles per hour with that four-seamer. put up a 3.28 ERA, 23-8 strikeout to walk rate in 24 2/3 innings over his 5 starts. Has had a couple different arm issues this season already. I believe it was a flexor early on in the season. He's currently sidelined with a lat strain. And so maybe that uptick in velocity has its downfalls playing out in arm injuries. That's certainly a possibility. But if Ryan Weathers is back and healthy and making starts for the Marlins, I think he needs to be rostered, even though a little bit of a worry about how it might hold up over the long haul if that arm is going to be able to hold up with the velocity uptick. But as long as he's on the mound, I think he should be rostered, and it seems like he should be back sooner rather than later.
Yeah, I feel like this is the 4th or 5th time we talked about Ryan Weathers this season. Hopefully we don't talk about him all next year because he's just healthy and good and in the rotation all season. No real proof that he can do that, but the talent is certainly there. How about Kai-Wei Teng, who's getting an opportunity with the San Francisco Giants, who, of course, traded a couple starters in the Rafael Devers deal. Then they sent down Hayden Birdsong, who just wasn't working out. Landon Roop is down as well. Roop is closing in on a rehab assignment, so there may not be too many more starts available for Teng, although he would be competing with Carson Wisenhunt, who also could be an interesting deep league option in leagues where he's available. Teng has made 2 appearances in the big leagues this season, 8 1/3 innings, 5.40 ERA, 132 whip. Nothing special, but in 54 innings at the AAA level, many of which came in the bullpen, but he had a 38% strikeout rate down in the minors. I'm pretty intrigued to see just how many of those whiffs he can translate at the big league level over a longer period. Was it just because he was pitching in shorter stints, and now that he's back as a starter, that's not going to be there at all? Not totally sure, but when you can miss this many bats, and when you're pitching at a great pitcher's park in San Francisco, and where there could be opportunities going forward, again, when Roop comes back, either Wisenhunt or Teng probably lose their job, but if the Giants are falling out of it, I don't know, do they just go 6-man to make sure Justin Verlander doesn't overwork himself and Robbie Ray in his first full season back is, not overworked down the stretch? Not totally sure. Basically, I think there could be an opportunity in a nice park for somebody who missed a lot of bats in the minors. That's good enough for me with Kai-Wei Teng.
Got Hurston Waldrop, my final deep league pitcher recommendation. Looks really good. And what was effectively a start last weekend, he came in after that rain delay and suspended game with the Speedway Classic, it was called, against the Reds. Pitched really well, 5 2/3 innings, just 1 run, 4 strikeouts against the Reds. It's going to start today and during a doubleheader against the Marlins. I think the first pitch is in like 15-20 minutes. So keep an eye on how Hurston Waldrop does in that outing, because there's definitely an opportunity for him to stick in the major league rotation. I mean, Erik Fedde, Carlos Carrasco are getting starts for the Braves right now. So not a difficult nut to crack there. And Waldrop has been awesome at AAA of late. Last 7 starts at AAA, Gwinnett 1.99 ERA. Got his walk rate down to 9.6% during that stretch. Not a great number, but for him, that's a much needed improvement. And generally a bat misser. He hasn't done it at the same level this season in the minors, but I think there still could be some untapped potential with Hurston Waldrop, and should get an opportunity to show what he can do down the stretch at the major league level.
Yeah, another case of a young guy who's got something going for him and has an opportunity as well. Waldrop's still quite young, just 23 years old. I forgot how recently he was drafted. He was a first-round pick in the 2023 draft. He's somebody who just became fantasy relevant really quickly. You might have thought that he had been around longer and had, worked his way up the levels gradually. But no, he was really accelerated, which I think probably means that we can penalize him less for the fact that he hasn't yet, claimed a permanent spot in this Atlanta rotation. Still just 23, still barely more than 2 full years after he was drafted. So still plenty of time for Hurston Waldrop to become what he was supposed to be. Moving on. Well, real quick, I should mention there's some Ryan Bergert chatter in the chat here. Interesting enough, deep league pitcher here. Bergert moved to Kansas City at the deadline. I suppose if that keeps him a little bit, does that keep him safer in the rotation? He already was having some opportunities in San Diego. The ERA is quite good for Bergert in 41 and a third innings, 283. Unfortunately, the xFIP and Sierra are 2 whole runs higher than that. I don't see a lot here for Bergert. He's got about league average strikeout rate with a 12% walk rate and can't keep the ball on the ground at all, 31.5% ground ball rate. I'm not sure I would have the guts to start Ryan Bergert. I don't know. Do you see anything there?
I think he's interesting. He's got a favorable upcoming schedule too. He's going to go against the Twins on Sunday. And if he does stick in the rotation, depending on what happens with Michael Lorenzen, his next start after that would be against the White Sox. So I think I had Bergert in the deep league ads last week or week before maybe. So I think he's interesting enough in deeper leagues that he's worth a flyer.
All right, fair enough. Moving on to the deep league hitters. I'm going to go with a hitter who was once good enough to be traded 1-for-1 for Christopher Sanchez. Well, when they were both still prospects. I'm talking about Curtis Mead, who was recently traded again from the Rays to the White Sox at the deadline in the Adrian Hauser deal. And Curtis Mead hasn't really put it together at the big league level yet, but how much of that is because he was mostly just stuck as a short side platoon guy in Tampa. He is, a fringy hitter who's right-handed. And on teams like Tampa, where they platoon all the time, you don't really want the fringy righties because they're going to get stuck on the short side of a platoon. And that's been the case for Mead. He's been okay, nothing special, and probably only going to start 2 to 3 games a week. You just didn't need that on your fantasy team. But Curtis Mead's still 24 years old, and now that he's found his way to the White Sox, a team with not nearly the same amount of depth as the Rays, could he get some everyday opportunity? He certainly is in the short term with Miguel Vargas on the IL, also Chase Mydroth on the IL, a couple injuries to this White Sox infield. If Mead performs well enough during these injury absences, he could probably claim a basically full-time role once those guys get healthy again. The question is really just what's here. And, he's played 115 major league games so far in his career, has just 5 homers, 7 steals, a 240 average. So you need to be projecting pretty far beyond what Curtis Mead has done so far to find him a particularly interesting option. But, he was a pretty highly rated prospect before hitting the wall in the big leagues. Should I say hitting the wall? I don't even know if that's fair. He just kept getting infrequent opportunities and not making the most of them for parts of 3 full seasons. So is it prospect fatigue with Mead? Can we say that? Was he a big enough prospect before? I think we can. The guy is just 24 years old. If he was 26, 27, I'd say, yeah, okay, it didn't work out. And now that's why he's on the White Sox. He's on the White Sox because he's not very good. But I don't think that's the case with Curtis Mead. I think we just haven't actually seen an extended run of regular at-bats. He's been pretty good at the AAA level his first AAA game was back in 2021, just 4 games that year. I mean, that tells you how his minor league career has gone, though. He's been on the cusp of the big leagues and just unable to get that permanent opportunity. The fact that he's also probably eligible at both middle and corner in your league. He's got 22 games at first and 17 at second. This is a guy who I want to have him on my roster if he does turn that corner, and I think he's going to have the opportunity to do that. So it's all still kind of wishful thinking with Curtis Mead, but I do think that if you have a need at either middle or corner, you could probably do worse.
Did I accidentally share my Google Doc with Uncle Ted this week? Because I feel like we've been on the same page. Because CJ Kafis is indeed my next deep league recommendation. Started 5 of 6 since being recalled for the Guardians. 3 of them have come in right field. Looks like he will have a chance to kind of run away with that job, at least against right-handed pitching. And as Charlie C. mentioned, a bunch of right-handers coming up for Kefas, so that's opportune time to add him. 300, 390, 539 slash line between double and triple A this season. 14 home runs. Kind of has more of a middling power profile, but look at the pulled balls in the air. That currently rates at 30.8% for CJ Kefas. If he would have enough batted ball events to qualify, that would rank 7th in baseball, just ahead of Kyle Schwarber. So he's figured out how to optimize his swing, hopefully. And look at progressive field over the last 2 seasons, especially last year. It's been a little less so this year, but it's become a really good place for left-handed bats to hit. Between those 2 seasons, 8th for StatCast part factors for left-handed power. And Kefas, as I mentioned, not great raw power, but could take advantage of that profile and the ballpark, and good plate discipline as well. It looks like he's going to get an opportunity in right field. So I like him as a deep league addition.
All right. My deep league guy up next will be the third base help that JPAC in the chat here is looking for. That is Daryl Hernaiz, or Daryl Hernaiz, if I'm reading his baseball reference pronunciation correctly here. We'll probably learn how to pronounce his name sooner or later, because he's getting opportunities in Sacramento. He's playing shortstop, so he might actually pick up, again, both middle and corner eligibility. He's eligible at third base on NFBC, is Daryl Hernaiz. Again, by the end of the show, I will figure out how to say that name. But here's a pop quiz for you, Ryan. Who has more strikeouts in the majors this year, you or Hernaiz?
You were cutting in and out. I missed the question.
The pop quiz is who has more strikeouts in the majors this year, you or Daryl Hernaiz?
Trick question. Tied with 0?
That is correct. You've almost beaten him. If he gets one more strikeout, you will be in the lead. But Hernaiz, through 9 games, has a 0% strikeout rate. Almost Jacob Wilson territory there, who he's getting opportunities because Wilson is on the shelf. And that's the question here, is will there still be opportunities when Wilson returns from his forearm injury? He recently began playing catch and running. We have Jacob Wilson's return date as 10 more days out. So that gives Hernaiz a little bit more of an opportunity to prove that he needs to stick in the lineup after Wilson returns. And look, the A's, they have spots open in the infield. Luis Urias, Max Schumann, Gio Urshela. These are the kind of players who are getting playing time in the infield for the A's. If you are a young player with some prospect pedigree, Hernaiz was not a big prospect, but has some real prospect pedigree. If you're just 24 years old and you're showing something, and specifically making an elite amount of contact, I would rather give opportunities to this kind of player rather than Luis Urias or Gio Urshela if you're a rebuilding team down the stretch. So I think there's a chance that Hernaiz gets to spend 2 full months as a regular player for the A's, showing what he can do. And what he can do is hit for a high average. At the AAA level this year, just an 11.5% strikeout rate. Last year, 14%. The year before that, 11%. This is somebody who can really get his bat on the ball. And we've seen with Jacob Wilson that you can do a lot of things if you get your bat on the ball at an elite rate. I don't think Hernaiz is going to have, that level of contact going forward, but he's had it so far. Again, literally 0 strikeouts through 9 games. He's also hit 2 homers. This is another weird Jacob Wilson thing where these guys are not hitting homers in the minors. It was 4 in 96 games for Hernaiz, but it's already 2 in 9 games at the big league level. I want to see where this goes. Mostly it's just that excellent bat to ball ability, but you get one skill to this level. That's worth an ad all by itself if the opportunity is there, and I think it could be there for the final 2 months for Hernandez.
Yeah, especially those weeks where they have home stands, be appealing to stream a guy like Hernandez or other A's players. And Uncle Ted, stop hacking my computer, because once again we are in lockstep. My last deep league recommendation for hitters, Alan Roden, kind of flopped with the Blue Jays early on this season after he had a lot of buzz in spring training and during draft season, after it looked like he was going to make the opening day roster, and then indeed did make the opening day roster, but got a new lease on life with the Twins since coming over in the Louis Varland trade. Started 5 of 6 against right-handed pitching. 3 of those have been from the leadoff spot. Last 2 games, Alan Roden has gone 4 for 10 with a home run and 4 runs scored. Look at his minor league track record: 302, 409, 457. Pretty encouraging skill set. I mean, there's a little bit of a kind of a younger, maybe rich man's version of Spencer Horwitz with Alan Roden. Good plate discipline, kind of middling power, not a ton of speed, but certainly has a really good skill, and that's getting on base. And he's been batting leadoff for the Twins. Could be a good guy to target for runs. Has a little bit of pop. We're talking more deeper league, I think, but I like Alan Roden, especially the situation he's in Minnesota.
Yeah, there were definitely going to be some opportunities created in Minnesota after that team cleared out at the trade deadline. Maybe it was going to take a little bit to figure out who was going to get those prime rosters or prime lineup spots and that sort of thing. But Roden, interesting enough, certainly to pick up if he's going to keep hitting in a key spot in the order, certainly. My final deep league hitter for today is Cole Young of the Mariners, a rookie second baseman, still just 22 years old, turned 22 just about 10 days ago. His season-long numbers are not very exciting for the 2022 first-round pick. In 52 games, it's a 678 OPS, translates to a 97 WRC+. It is a tough place to hit in Seattle, so only slightly below average. 3 homers, 1 steal. There's not quite enough there if you look at his whole profile, but how about Cole Young just over the last month, where he has a 157 WRC+. All 3 of his homers have come in that last month, and he has more walks than strikeouts over that stretch, a 15.5% walk rate to go with a 13% strikeout rate. We're talking about a guy who, again, just turned 22 in the middle of that stretch, and he's walking more than he's striking out. Now, if that was all that he can do, then that might not be that much of a player, but there was more here in the minors. Never a lot of power, topped out at 11 homers, but did have over 20 steals for 2 consecutive seasons. Not getting playing time against lefties, so that does keep him definitely a deep league option. But a young guy with this level of control over the strike zone that he's shown over the last month, who should offer us speed. I believe there was some quote recently after he finally stole his first base where he said that Josh Naylor told him to steal bases. And we know that Josh Naylor apparently thinks that you can just steal bases, because Josh Naylor moved to Seattle and is suddenly a speed demon despite having, I think it's 6th percentile sprint speed. So, hey, if that's a sign that Cole Young is actually going to tap into some of that speed we saw in the minors, that's pretty encouraging, because if you can, again, walk more than you strike out at this age, should lead to some good on-base percentages and, opportunities to score runs. He is still stuck at the bottom of the lineup, though, and only starting against righties. Keeps him as a deep league option, but I'm more interested in Cole Young, certainly, than I was at any other point this season.
Yeah, look there for a little bit like maybe the Mariners were going to stick Jorge Polanco at second base down the stretch. They've been kind of mixing him in more there, but it seems like that plan, at least against right-handed pitching, is has been abandoned. So I think Cole Young is pretty safe for playing time as goes as far the rest of the way. I mean, they could have done that to kind of try to get a little bit more offense, but now that they made those 2 big offensive additions at the corner infield spots, probably less of a need to do that. So I think Cole Young is safer playing time wise than I thought he might be.
Yeah, sounds about right to me. So that's going to do it for today's show. Hopefully we found enough interesting names still. I think there's still more names coming up. Hopefully we get some call-ups next week. So those speculative stashes like Bubba Chandler and Samuel Basallo, hopefully we're talking about them again next week and finally getting to see them at the big league level. Again, that date, August 15th. That's next Friday is the date where you can call up a player and they'll still have little enough service time that they could win Rookie of the Year next season. Looking forward to that on next week's show, but thank you to everybody who hung out today. Thank you to our sponsor, the NFFC and the RotoWire Fantasy Baseball Podcast. We'll be back tomorrow. Jeff and Scott going over this weekend's FAB results.